Many thanks to my awesome patrons and fine tool partners. If you're looking for some free stuff and want some early access, consider becoming a patron today.
Let's make a barn door. Woo! That's right, you heard me, a barn door. And it's not just any barn door. We are going to make it in a mosaic style pattern because there's going to be two of them. One will be a 45-degree angle this way, the other will be a 45-degree angle this way. And they will be a matching set, but they will be custom. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you. Please be sure, if you like videos like this, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to click that notification bell. It'll tell you anytime I upload new content. And hey, if you're looking for some free stuff, think about becoming a patron. Not only will you get early access to these videos, but you'll get some stickers, maybe a shirt, and maybe something extra. You never know. But anyway, let's get started.
After getting the door out and then laying it on my table saw, I figured that I needed approximately 11 sticks of alder right here to equal out the amount that I still have to make for the next door. I've already got a couple of pieces that are tagged right back there, as well as some of these pieces right here. Now, these aren't the ones that I've got to use, but these are the center pieces that are the 45 pieces that go like this, but I've got to make the other ones going the opposite way. One of the big problems that I have, these pieces are all too short. So there's 6 pieces right here that I got to throw away. I was hoping because they were cut-offs from those that I would have enough left over, but I don't. So that sucks. However, I do have these pieces right here, which will work. So one little quick tip that I wanted to give, and I've done this enough that it saves a lot of time in the shop, and if you don't have a digital gauge on your planer, you might utilize this. I'm using the DeWalt DW735, and it comes equipped with a gauge that I have dialed in pretty well to the thickness of the board that I want to achieve. So I know that if I put my dial right at 3/4 of an inch right here, you can kind of barely see it right there, that 3/4 inch line mark. If I put it right there, I know that my handle position is just forward of straight up and down where the handle is located at the bottom. Then I know the thickness of the alder that I've been working with, which is roughly 15/16 thick, maybe a little bit less. If I take this handle and just crank it 1, 2, 3 turns, that gets me close enough that it gets me to the starting point for this without bogging the first pass down. All right, now with all the milling process stuff out of the way, I'm on my normal microphone and normal camera. So I'm gonna take you through how to make this door. We're first gonna start with the stiles on either side. And this particular door has wider stiles than it does a rail at the top and bottom. Now the construction of the barn door can be done a multitude of ways. And the quickest way that I have found so I can turn these doors fast, is by making a panel that is completely solid, that is laminated by several pieces all in a row, and then glue a face frame to that panel in the configuration of whatever the client wants. Now, that does make the very back of the door completely flat with no kind of design whatsoever. However, if your client does want designs on front and back, you'll need to make face frames that are wide, just like you would do on a standard door that would swing open in a house. So your face frame would be 1.5 inches thick, and then you would dado out the center to make whatever pattern that needs to be made. Just be careful on what you do because the barn door hardware that you use is specific to the thickness of the door, what it can accommodate and what it can't. So check your hardware and find out what you can make and how thick of a door it can hold. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to take into consideration when we glue up this panel is the grain direction on the end grain. If you'll notice, this one right here kind of cups up from right to left or left to right. This one cups down from left to right. So in order to keep the panel as flat as possible, try and keep the grain direction running alternating as much as possible. So this one we'll leave just like that. We'll leave that one. This one is a center cut, so it seems to be going more down than it is up. So we'll flip this one over
And then we'll make sure that this one goes down, so we'll flip it over. This one is kind of another center cut, roughly, more like riffs on, so we'll probably try and keep it where it's at, and we'll do the same thing on this end capper. Now, gluing up a panel, there are several ways you can do this. The way I used to do it, which did slow me down quite a bit until I acquired the domino, was making tongue and groove joinery. That ensured that these things were lined up and would stay as flat as possible. Now that I have the domino, I just put about maybe 5 or 6 dominoes that are spaced out roughly about a foot a piece. Before I do this, I'm going to run all of these pieces through my drum sander. If you don't have a drum sander, use a belt sander or a random orbit sander. Get these smooth before you glue up the panel. It will save you tons of time when it comes to sanding this down after a glue up. Trust me on this. With all the pieces ran through the drum sander, one on each side, with a pretty significant cut on each side to make sure that every square inch of these pieces are nice and smooth, it's time to get started on assembling the panel. While the panel is drying, we'll work on the face frame. Now, the advantage that the domino has over a biscuit joiner is the ability to cut the slots different sizes. So you can make it as tight as the domino is that you are using, or you can enlarge it by 1 to 2 steps bigger. This will give me the ability to line these up a little bit more if I am off the slightest bit when it comes to how I make the mortise holes for the dominoes.
So what I'll do is right here on the end of one mark, I'll just mark it with an O for oversized, and then I'll just leave this one alone.
Okay, now with the panel glued up and while it's curing and drying, I'm going to start working on the face frame and getting it put together, so by the time that this is ready to work with, this will be all in clamps. Okay, this panel is really very simple. It's just a rail and style setup, one at the top, one at the bottom, and then glued up, aligned with dominoes. I've got a couple of these Bessie clamps right here just to keep it nice and flat, and then a clamp here going across the entire thing just to keep it nice and snug while the glue sets up. I've done that on both ends. Also, just to clean up the panel, I have rerun it through the drum sander. Now the center panels are going to be inset of a rabbet that I just made using my handheld router. The easiest way to go about making these panel pieces is to nip the 45-degree dog ear off of one end right at the corner. Then, after that's done, scribing a mark where the rabbet is on the other end, and then cutting that off at the miter saw. Then run it all the way down the door, and when you get to the corners, you can either choose to round over those or just cut them into an area where it will be completely hidden, but may not be conforming to that curve. With the face frame and all of the inset panels in place and glued down, now it's time to clean up all of the rough edges that are on the back side of the panel because this thing is oversized. So I need to establish a straight edge. So what I'm going to do is run the router with a flush trim bit all down the length of this edge. That way I can use it as my straight guide on the table saw to clean off the other edge because it's pretty rough. And then I'll use my track saw to take care of the two ends using the straight edge as the point of reference to make it nice and square. Then once the door is finally trimmed to size, I'm just going to take a handheld router with my chamfer bit raised up slightly to take about an 1/8 inch chamfer right off all 4 edges. One of the last couple things that I need to do for these doors is to put a slot down in the very bottom for a guide that is optional to use on these doors. I always include them whether or not the client chooses to use it. So it's just something that I make a habit of whenever I make doors. Now just using my straight edge guide and a router and a cove bit, just going to make a groove that will allow the client to be able to grab the door from the opposite side to move it back and forth. So that wraps up this particular part of the video. If you join me next time, I'll show you how to put the barn door hardware on the door prior to throwing stain and finish on. I'll even go in depth on how to apply the lacquer, much like I did on a prior video that you probably caught a couple of years ago. Only there's a couple lessons that I've learned since then. And on the video after that, I'll show you how to hang it. So if you guys have any comments, tips, or suggestions that you want to offer me on how to make a barn door, I'd love to hear them. Drop them down below. Subscribe, consider becoming a patron, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Don't forget, check out all of my prior stuff that you see right over there, and I'll see you on the next one. Boom!